right, everyone. Hello. Let me just squeeze on in here. Hi. It has definitely been a while since I have done a tea time live stream. Let me just go ahead and get to my channel so I can check your guys' comments. Video channel, live, turn down the ad music. Okay, so let's see here. Hey Titan 2024, where is Alex? So sometimes if I'm running like a minute or two behind, because it takes an hour to set up for these tea time streams, a whole hour, a solid hour. So if I'm running like a minute or two late, I'll just start the stream while I'm finishing boiling the water or whatever. So I just start the stream and I let it play, so that way people can start tuning in. And by the time I sit down, I usually have like the maximum amount of viewers for the beginning of the stream. So, but hello Moonzer. Let's see. Hello Ryan. Hello Conrad. Hello K4RNA. Hello Kevin. Mark. Steve from the Blue Ribband. Max. Who do we got? Mr. Golden V. So yeah, hello everyone. Hello Ella. Good evening, good afternoon, Alex and everyone. Thank you, Ella. Good evening. Or afternoon. To me, it's afternoon. Alright, so hey Mike. Merry Christmas, Alex. Thank you, Mike. Merry Christmas. So for those of you, happy holidays and Merry Christmas to all of you. This won't be the last tea time stream for the year. I think I'll do one more next week. But yeah, so it's been a really hectic month. Lots of stuff is going on. I've been telling you guys for the last couple of tea time streams that I have a surprise coming to everybody. And I'm me and my friends are rushing to get it completed enough so that way when it does go up for everyone to see, it is at least a good ways completed, so there's something for everyone to see. So it is a what do you call it? It's an educational but still fun way of learning about the Queen Mary. And so it is all about the Queen Mary, and I think you guys would really like it, particularly if you enjoy some reading, if you enjoy reading about things that you guys like. So if you hate reading and you absolutely deplore it, then unfortunately this surprise won't be for you. But there will at least be some things for you to see if you don't like reading, so I suppose there is a little bit of something for everyone. But yeah, so hello Ozzy, how was Alex's weather today? Oh, and thank you for the compliment about the video I did at the beach. So today is a very nice overcast day. I don't say that at all with any sarcasm. I love gloomy days, and it is a nice, cold, slightly hazy, gloomy day. I love it. It's perfect, especially when doing a tea time stream, because it's a little bit chilly in my room, and that makes it nice, it makes it comfortable to have a spot of tea. So yeah, a couple days ago, I think it was Wednesday, I went to Cannon Beach with my father, so that was pretty fun. I'd been there only once before, but I loved it when I was there. But it was very busy, and that was over a year ago. So when my father and I went, it's the start of winter here, so there's nobody. It was freezing cold. It was very kind of like foggy and hazy, and it made for wonderful pictures of the sunset. So that was a very fun vlog I did, and I was experimenting with the style of vlogging that I'll be doing when I go on my UK trip, when I go to visit the UK and I sail aboard the Queen Mary 2 and all that sort of stuff. I want, besides making history videos of the things that I go and see, I want to make vlogs about the things I go and see. And to do vlogs, I wanted to try a style of continuous filming. So there's hardly any cuts. Only a cut if it's absolutely necessary. But pretty much no editing whatsoever. It's just like full videoing of everything I'm doing for 45 minutes to an hour. And I've seen a few YouTube channels that do something like that, and they don't put any music, they don't do any fancy stuff with the editing, they just film what they're doing. And I find that stuff really addicting. I don't know why. It's just, it's some really addicting stuff. So I thought, what if I did that kind of stuff when I went to the UK? You know, because I wanted to film vlogs. I used to film vlogs when I lived in Southern California, and I went to Disneyland a lot. But those were highly edited vlogs, and, you know, the music and everything, the whole works. And it was a lot of work to do that. And in the end, it was kind of like, maybe it would have just been more fun if I just let the camera roll so people could experience what it's like to see these sites, you know, from my perspective. And so it seemed that the people who did watch the beach video, they really liked it. They were like, oh, this was fun. Like, you know, I enjoyed just, you know, the continuous filming. So I was like, all right, that tells me that there is some potential there. So let me get started on the tea here. I got boiling water, but first, so I have, for those of you that are new, in order to prevent some kind of thermal shock to the china, I fill the teapot and teacup halfway with the hottest tap water that I have. Then I top it off with some boiling water just to slowly bring up the temperature. I'll let that sit for a minute to get hotter. Teacup next. And slowly bring up the temperature, because this old china isn't like the coffee mugs in your cupboard. It's not designed to just have straight boiling water thrown into it. You gotta kind of warm it up a little bit. I imagine when the ship was at sea, every time they stopped in Southampton, they reloaded on china, just completely reloaded on hundreds of pieces of china every time. So I imagine, well, I say hundreds, but maybe like 100 pieces of china every 2 voyages. But I imagine that they would have gone through a lot of it, because they wouldn't have had time to preheat all this stuff. They probably would have just had one of those commercial thermoses in the kitchen that already has boiling water in it, and, you know, they probably give it a quick rinse with some boiling water, dump that out, and then bring it out to the passenger. So I imagine that the thermal shock sometimes would have cracked them. I know that happens because when I was collecting this stuff, one of the 2 things that are always cracked that never hold water are the teacup and the teapot, because everyone who owns them tries to drink tea out of them and then doesn't pre-warm them, so they crack them and the tea just seeps out, and you can see the tea stained cracks all over it. So thankfully I was able to find at least one teapot that wasn't cracked, and at least one teacup that wasn't cracked. And so my other teacup and my other teapot behind me are both cracked from the previous owner. And it was funny because the previous owner was like, how did people drink tea in this stuff? It just cracks immediately. And I ended up telling him, you know, after I bought it, I'm like, you gotta slowly warm it up, you know. So, Titan says, hey Alex, I have a question. The whole world say about Queen Mary going to dry dock. I just, you know that. I'm not sure I understand your question. The whole world say about Queen Mary going to dry dock. Just, you know that. Just, I don't know what you're asking. Does the whole world know that the Queen Mary needs to go to dry dock? If that's what you're asking, I'm not sure if the whole world knows. The Queen Mary could definitely use a dry docking to, you know, scrape the hull down and, you know, maybe sandblast it a little bit, you know, and put some new anti-fouling paint, but otherwise there shouldn't be any major issues to worry about down there. So, oh, Mark, that's really nice of you to give your friend a pair of work boots. Ozzy says, is that beach where they filmed the Goonies at? Yes, they filmed the Goonies there. At least the opening credits, at least. And then nearby is the town of Astoria, where the other part of the film takes place in, is the town of Astoria. So, Ozzy says, is Alex having Earl Grey tea? No, Alex is having Yorkshire Gold. So, let me go ahead and now I gotta empty this out. And then I will fill that completely with the boiling water. This goes in for 4 minutes. Trying to center it so that way when I put the... It almost never fits correctly when I put anything in there. But 4 minutes on that, so I gotta check it at 118. Ella says, to me it kind of feels more genuine if a vlog isn't highly edited. I agree. You know, you would think that a vlog that is not edited at all, it's just a straight film through, you would think that it's very, like, what's the word? Like, the person's inexperienced, they're amateur. And yeah, you could mistaken it for that. But what you end up finding is the ones that are not edited at all, and it's just a straight film through, experiencing what they're experiencing in that moment, it starts to feel a lot more genuine. It feels a lot more raw. You see things that you didn't ever realize you'd be interested in seeing. You know, there are vloggers out there who travel the world and go to places that tourists would never think to go to because it's not exactly a tourist location. And, you know, and they film just straight through what they're doing, talking to locals, eating local food, that kind of stuff, and they just don't stop filming. They just keep the camera rolling. And the interactions they have with folks and the things that they do, if you had to edit through that for time, you would cut out all that good stuff just to get to the part about them trying the food or the part about them seeing the site that they're going to see. But the journey to get there is just as fun, and so you don't really realize that when you see an edited vlog. And like I said, I used to do edited vlogs all the time, and it was very time consuming. But I thought, people don't want to see what happens in between. But as it turns out, there are millions of people around the world who are subscribed to these vloggers, who are there to see the stuff that happens in between. So. Yeah, it turns out it's really good. It's a really good vlogging style. Windsor says, Alex, when you were on Queen Mary, did you go up to the bridge? Yes, and I filmed it too. So that's why on my Queen Mary tour video, the virtual tour video that I have, everything in that video was filmed by me. So when you see me go up to the bridge, that was me that filmed it. Let's see. One more minute on that tea. Lachlan says, "Hey Alex, has any more work been done on the Mary? Have they put up flowers in the main lounge fireplaces? Wait, they have put up flowers on the main lounge fireplaces, and they going to restore Queen Mary standard?" Well, anyway, to answer your first question, yes, more work has been done on the Queen Mary. I've been putting together a repair, Queen Mary repair update. The only thing is, I will use footage that has previously been filmed for me to show certain areas where stuff has been done, but it is not an actual footage of the stuff that has been done, because unfortunately my friend who usually goes to the Queen Mary to do the filming for me, he's been busy the last 2 months, like really busy, and I don't think he's been able to go to the Queen Mary at all, because I've asked him, and I think he really tried, but he's just so busy. So I don't have any footage of the new stuff. I have a couple of photos of the new things, and I can insert those wherever I need to, but otherwise it shouldn't be too bad. And then tied up with the update will be the year in review. So it'll be the whole 2023, all the work that's been done on the ship this past year will be at the end of that video. So that way people who watch it will understand just the scope, the amount of work that has been done on the ship. So yeah, all right, it is time for the tea. Because it's funny, like, I mean, there's always going to be negative people, right? We know that. There's going to be negative people, but there are some negative people out there that say, oh, they haven't done anything to the Queen Mary. There's like I was reading a review from someone who was like, oh, I've been, hearing about these updates. I think they were talking about my channel. They were like, I've been hearing about these updates they've been doing to the Queen Mary, so I booked my trip, and then when I went, there was this, and that wrong, and this, and that wrong. And they're like, and nothing looks like it's been changed. And I'm like, how do you watch my videos and not see the difference? Especially when I put them, I show the before and after sometimes if I have the footage. I'm like, how can you not see the difference? There's a huge difference. And it's getting better every single day, and some of the stuff that they're going to be doing on the Queen Mary starting in January is going to be so awesome. I mean, like, I'm so excited for the beginning of next year, because there's going to be some new things, little things, but new things. And these little things will make a huge difference, So they have a very small budget to work with. They can't just sit there and spend, $50 million doing a major upgrade to something. They have to work little bits at a time with little, with the little maintenance budget that they have. But it's doing well, and the ship is actually, they just reported that between July and October of this past year, they earned a gross profit of $2.25 million. Or was it 2.50? I forget if there was an extra 2 in there. But yeah, just about $2.5 million of profit in just those 3 months. Just those 3 months. So I imagine, next year, a full year of operation, 2024, will probably earn them quadruple that amount, hopefully, and all that money can go into more and more restoration, because they have said, they're like, the profits we earned have immediately gone back into the ship, and you can see that that's exactly what's happening. So yeah, they have not been. Well, I mean, there's no one to pocket the profits. The city can't pocket profits without the taxpayers literally being able to see it, because the city has to audit itself every year. Um, what am I doing? Oh, I'm just putting a little bit more water because it got a little bit cold. Um, and then, of course, uh, the company that operates it, Evolution Hospitality, they don't own the ship, so they can't just. They're like employed by the city, so they can't pocket the profits because it's not theirs to pocket. So all that money that's been made has gone back into the ship, and it's just been amazing to watch the transformation. Okay, let me 2 scoops of sugar. Not 2, but 1.5. These little demi-tasse spoons. Oh, hello, Shiloh. Shiloh is one of the folks that has been helping me with this big surprise that I'm going to reveal after Christmas. So I think next week, I haven't decided when, but next week, I'm going to put out an announcement video that announces the big surprise I've been telling you guys about. But it's kind of like a pre-announcement because I think it will require at least another 2 weeks to finish it. I don't know, maybe I might just hold off on the announcement because I feel like if I'm going to announce it, it should be ready when I announce it. But yeah, I was hoping to have it ready by New Year's Day, but I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I don't think it's going to be ready by New Year's Day. So Titan says Queen Mary box removed soon on dry dock 2024. The box around the propeller, no, they're gonna keep it because they need it for the propeller exhibit. But I don't think Queen Mary will be moved to a dry dock at all in 2024 because they have to build a dry dock, and it takes years to build a dry dock. They're still in the planning stages of where this dry dock might go. So they haven't even begun constructing the dry dock yet. So I wouldn't expect a dry dock, even if they started next year, I wouldn't expect the dry dock to be done till, 2030, basically. 2030. Yeah. And the ship can wait. It's not in such dire straits that it needs a dry dock right this minute. But yeah, it in the next 10 years, it really should be dry docked. But yeah, so they plan to build one. It's just, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cost, I think they estimated close to $250 million because they might have to reclaim land first. Then they'll have to start, with all the concrete construction. Those dry docks, when they're that big and they hold that much water or that much weight of a ship when it's, in dry dock, that concrete has to be like 40 feet thick. So there's going to be a lot of construction. Let's go ahead and put some milk. Just a little bit more. All right. Cheers. Pretty good. I still prefer Earl Grey, but Yorkshire Gold is pretty good. It's bitter, but it's smooth in comparison to English breakfast tea. Um, Moonzer says, Alex, can you do another live stream at the Spruce Goose, please? I would, but first of all, hardly anybody watched it. And I mean, any of the Spruce Goose stuff I put out, because I put out a couple of Spruce Goose videos, and nobody really cared for it. Everybody's here for Queen Mary. They're not here for Spruce Goose. So I kind of felt like, well, that was a waste of time, you know? And the live stream, a few of, people showed up to it, but not that many. I can't live stream inside the museum because the giant metal dome around the Spruce Goose itself is makes it difficult to get reception. So I'd have to be outside, and it's usually raining outside because this is Oregon. So I don't know. It just wasn't a good live stream experience. It was fun, though, when I was there with Chris and Steve, and we walked underneath the airplane and stuff. They moved that airplane now. I don't think it's there anymore. I think it's someone else bought it. Not the Spruce Goose, the giant airplane that's outside. It was like a 747 or something like that. But yeah. But I mean, for me to even go there, I would have to go with my dad because, I don't think Chris or Steve are going to be here in the next couple months to a year. But yeah, my dad and I already went. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like the right time to do that. Hello, Candace. Hello, Charles. Nice. Wow, this live stream is really behind because I'm looking at it, and right at this moment in my live stream, I'm just barely putting milk in the tea. Usually there's a 12-second delay, but this is a few minutes delay. Jeez. King of Battleship says, now they just have to remove the submarine next to Queen Mary. I agree, because that submarine it's just garbage at this point. It's not salvageable. It'd be like picking pieces out of a paper shredder. I mean, you can, and you can tape them all back together again, but it's just not worth it, And so it's the same problem with that submarine next to Queen Mary. It is so bad that inspectors actually don't even feel safe being inside of it. They were inside of it to inspect it, of course, but they were like, nobody should be on this thing, not even us, when they last inspected it. Because the very aft, what do you call it, watertight compartment in the submarine was already starting to flood. It wasn't fully flooded, but there was water in there. Especially because there's two hulls on the submarine, the outer hull and the inner hull. The outer hull was already corroded to the point where it was not holding back any water whatsoever. It was just so badly corroded, it just... You can see it with your own eyes. There's just holes all along the waterline. And then the inner hull is starting to be eaten through as well. Well, I say starting, but it's already pretty advanced. It's so advanced that the inspectors, the engineers, they felt that if they had tried to lift it out of the water or tow it somewhere, it might just break apart from the sheer movement. They said it was just like tissue paper. It was just that bad. So the only thing that's really keeping it together is the fact that, the lagoon that it's in, Queen Mary's Lagoon, is surrounded by a giant rock breakwater, which keeps the lagoon extremely calm. So there's no water to make it, break apart or anything like that. No rough waves or anything like that. So, but yeah, it's just, yeah, it's bad. It's so bad, and it needs to be gotten rid of. Sorry, I can't speak English today. But I think one of the reasons why it hasn't been done yet is because it's just tied up in a legal battle. It's going to cost at least $5 million to do anything with it, to either pull it out of the water and scrap it, or tow it out of the lagoon and scrap it. Nobody wants that, and not even the scrapping companies can't do anything with it. The metal on it is so badly corroded, it's really not recyclable. It's just rust. It's all rust at this point. So it's not even worth it for the recycling companies to even take it. They'd really just be doing the job of cutting it up and throwing it away, into like a dump or something. So nobody wants to pay for it, especially not the city of Long Beach, because they would have to use taxpayer money to get rid of it. And of course the taxpayers are going to be like, you want $5 million for throwing away a submarine? So the city is like, well, we don't want to get that kind of negative press. So they're like, we don't want to do it. We want the previous owner of the submarine to do it. But the previous owner of the submarine says that the submarine was legally given to the previous leaseholder of the Queen Mary. And the previous leaseholder of the Queen Mary is, first of all, bankrupt, disbanded, and they have no money. So it's just this back and forth battle. And it probably won't be over anytime soon. I know everybody's been asking me, when will they get rid of that submarine? And it's always the same answer. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but let's hope it does, so. Madison says, first time joining a live stream of yours. Oh, thanks. Well, I hope you enjoy it. Christmas for... Madison says, sadly, I'm sick on Christmas for the first time ever. Oh my gosh. Well, hopefully, you still have a few days. Maybe you'll be able to get over it and have a good Christmas. King of Battleships says, why did they reduce the size of Queen Mary's propellers from 20 foot to 18 foot? Well, it's not for any cosmetic reason. It was just because they found out a better design for a hydrodynamic propeller, and that just so happened that it required the propeller to be smaller in terms of diameter. So it's not like they were... I don't want you to get confused. I know sometimes when I talk, it confuses people. But it's not like they said, oh, the ship will move faster with a smaller propeller. That's not it at all. It's just that they were designing a more hydrodynamic propeller in the late 1930s to put on the Queen Mary, and it just so happened that the better propeller design was, 2 feet smaller and a couple tons lighter. So the original propellers on Queen Mary were 20 foot diameter and they weighed 35 tons, but the propellers that Queen Mary had from 1937 or 38 all the way on to now, they were all 18 foot diameter and 32 tons. So, yeah, and they've replaced the Queen Mary's propellers a few times during her seagoing career. But otherwise, yeah. Yeah. Let's have one of these Scottish shortbreads. Oh, Madison says, I just love ships. Get to spend time in bed watching videos about my favorite ships. Olympic class, Lusitania class, RMS Queen Mary, and many others. Nice. Marsh says, maybe a floating dry dock like the one used for Carnival Vista. So that's interesting because they can't do that. The first reason why they can't get a moving dry dock or a floating dry dock for Queen Mary is, one, it won't fit in the harbor. The harbor is too shallow. So they would have to tow the Queen Mary out of Long Beach Harbor. And Long Beach Harbor, Queen's Gate, is like 3 miles offshore. So when they go out there, they're going to face some tough currents and things like that, which I'm sure tugboats can handle. But the thing is that if anything goes wrong, the Queen Mary is not really seaworthy. She can float around the harbor, but she's just not in good enough shape to be out at sea like that. And that's technically sea, beyond, 3 miles beyond the shore. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that the largest floating dry dock big enough for the Queen Mary is not anywhere in the United States or the North American continent. If there is one, I think they said it's on the East Coast. So wherever they get one, it's going to either have to cross the Pacific or cross the Suez Canal. I'm sorry, not Suez. Panama Canal. Cross the Panama Canal. And that'll cost them a lot of money because Long Beach will have to pay for it. They estimated that a floating dry dock, with everything included, because the ship will need to be repaired enough to make her seaworthy to even leave the harbor to meet the dry dock. They said all in all that'll cost something like $300 million. At that price, it would be cheaper to build the dry dock on land. So, yeah, because they that's what they estimated was about $300 million for the floating dry dock, but $250 million for the permanent dry dock. So, yeah, they chose to do a permanent dry dock. Madison says, what's Spruce Goose? The Spruce Goose, the real name of the airplane is the H-4 Hercules. But this model here, let me turn it around, is a model of the Spruce Goose, or the H-4 Hercules as it's really known. And it is the world's largest wooden airplane. And at one point, it had the largest wingspan of any airplane on the planet until 2019. It was built in 1947. So from 1947 to 2019, it had the widest wingspan of any airplane ever. Though it could not claim to be the largest airplane because, there's various other measurements that make it not the largest airplane. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It was created by Howard Hughes, the famous aviator, and it flew only once, and some people would argue that it didn't really fly, but it did leave the water because it is a floating airplane, so it did leave the water. I think there was a gap of about 75 feet, and it flew for about a mile, and that was in Long Beach Harbor. And ever since then, it has never flown ever again. So, and now it sits in a museum here in McMinnville, Oregon. I've gone to see it twice. It is absolutely ginormous. This plane is huge. It's bigger than the average plane that you take to get across the United States. If you fly you know, Alaska Airlines or Southwest Airlines or whatever, the planes that you usually take to fly anywhere from California to like New York or something, are much smaller than this plane. In fact, most planes are smaller than this plane. It's still one of the largest planes in the world, and it's made entirely out of wood. So, yeah, I'm trying to think, like, there's only literally, like, literally a handful, maybe 5, you can count 5, I think, on your hand, of planes that are larger than this plane. Yeah, most planes do not come anywhere near the size of the Spruce Goose. So, it is a huge plane. Oh! My friend Steve from Expedition Steve is here. He's the one that went with me to the Spruce Goose. He's like, I want to go back. We should. That'd be fun. So, let's see. Moonzer says, Alex, what if they move the Queen Mary to another Long Beach location? They won't, and there's really no reason to. There's no reason to, because it's much cheaper for the Queen Mary to sit precisely where she's at than to move anywhere else. I feel like I'd get in a long conversation if I went any further on that. But the Queen Mary, basically, to put it in layman's terms, doesn't pay any rent for sitting where she is. So that makes it really cheap to operate her. Ozzy says, we've got fog here in Fort Mojave this morning. No pirates here. Awesome. Mark says, tomorrow is Christmas Eve. Indeed it is. People are talking about the submarine. The submarine, I would not argue, is historic whatsoever. It was built in 1971, so yeah, it is old, but in terms of a vessel, but it is not historic whatsoever. I don't think it saw any battles, any fights, no wars. It was retired in 1994. It's Russian. It's not. It's not even like I think Steve or somebody said, if it was, K4RNA said, now if it was built during World War II, we would have something. But the thing is, it wasn't. So there's really no history to it. It is a submarine, so that in itself is kind of a rare thing to explore and have as a tourist attraction. But other than that, it's got no historic or sentimental value whatsoever. So, that's unfortunate. I think there are people who really love that submarine. There's a group of people who were hoping to preserve it, but I was talking to them and I was like, there's nothing to preserve. The thing, I hate to say it because people have said this about the Queen Mary, but the Queen Mary, at least, there was a huge chance of saving the Queen Mary. It was like little things needed to be done to save the ship. But this submarine would need completely being taken apart down to every last nut and bolt and then rebuilt with all new materials. Like, that's how invasive the refurbishment would be, all for something that isn't really of any historic or sentimental value. So, yeah, it's just weird. Steve from the Blue Ribbon says, technically speaking, Queen Mary is highly valuable for her steel. It is pre-war, uncontaminated steel. Interesting. What does uncontaminated mean? What would be the contaminated part about it? Joe B says, Merry Christmas, Alex. I hope you're able to spend time with your family. I certainly am. I'll be spending time with my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, and my sister is expecting too. So by next Christmas, I'll have a nephew to celebrate Christmas with. So that'll be really fun. I'm excited to be an uncle. So Eric says, greetings from Eugene, Oregon. Greetings! Moonzer says, Alex, have you ever watched the James Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun? It's the movie of the wreck C. Wise was in. I haven't seen the movie, but I have seen screenshots of that scene. Yeah. Yeah, you know, Steve was saying that the Spruce Goose has 8 Pratt & Whitney R4 3060 or 360 R4 360 Wasp radial engines. Yeah, a lot of people claim, because you see the H4 Hercules never flew more than 75 feet off the water, and some people claim that it wasn't capable of flying at proper altitude at all. They say, oh, it couldn't have. It couldn't have. And the thing is we're talking about Howard Hughes here. You know, he's the aviation genius. He's the guy that made impossible things for airplanes happen. And the other thing, too, is that I was talking to the docent at the museum, because he was a former airman, and he was just like, yeah, these engines, he goes, all 8 of them are more than enough to lift this thing high into the air. And he says it's more than enough. It had to be, because the airplane was designed to be able to lift a load of at least 750 troops. No, I'm sorry. At least, I forget how many troops, but at least 750,000 pounds was the minimum weight load that the H4 Hercules had to be able to fly with. So even if it couldn't lift that whole payload, I hope that's the right word, even if it couldn't lift that whole load, it had to at least be able to lift itself with all those 8 Pratt & Whitney engines. They were the largest propeller aviation propeller engines ever built. And I think they still are, I believe. If I remember correctly, those propellers on the H4 Hercules are still the largest propeller engines ever made. So, it definitely would have flown at full altitude. And it was designed to fly designed to fly across the Atlantic on one tank of gas, essentially, for lack of better words. So I got to see some of the there's a double bottom to the H4 Hercules, and the entire double bottom has all these fuel tanks in them, huge fuel tanks. And that thing could carry a lot of fuel, I'll tell you. Let me go ahead and pour another cup of tea. A lot of times on these streams, I do so much talking, I never get to my second cup. So this time I wanted to get to the second cup. Alright, so let's see if we can answer some. Lachlan says, hey Alex, coming to you from Australia, day before Christmas. Not hot this year, cool and raining with flowers blooming and the grass green. Oh, nice. Yeah, I know you guys are probably going through what we would call summer. But yeah, flowers blooming, everything, all for Christmas. Up here, when we think of Christmas, we think of the snow, the cold, the rain, you know, um, all that good stuff. But I think you guys look forward to days at the beach, barbecues, you know, blooming flowers and all that sort of stuff. It's really interesting to think that that's what it's like on the other side of the globe. Um, Marsh says, ever heard of USS Yorktown in Charleston? Kind of similar place as in a similar place as Queen Mary. I've heard the name USS Yorktown, but I don't think I've seen it. At least not on pictures. Um, Ozzy says, Alex, did you see One Eye Willie pirate with your dad? No, I didn't. Plumbit says, does the Queen Mary have a double hull like Olympic? Yes, Queen Mary has a double hull. So it extends all the way around the keel and all the way up the sides of the Queen Mary to the top of E deck. So bottom of D deck. Trying to quantify that for you. That would be a height of 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5.5 decks high is how tall the double hull was on Queen Mary. It's still there. Yeah. That double hull is still watertight to this day. They've opened up all those tanks, the ones that aren't being used for ballast. And they're still bone dry, so. Steve says age is just a number. Yeah, it's just a number, but there's big numbers and there's small numbers. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Lori says, really hope they put profits back into the ship and not waste it or put it in their pockets. They certainly aren't. They have been, every penny that they've earned, they've gone and put it back into the ship. So, yeah, they've definitely not been, pocketing any of the profits. The only people that could do it, potentially, is the city. But like I said earlier, the city, they're a city, so their finances are very transparent. People can see what they're doing, where money is going. So they can't really pocket the profits because then people would see it, you know. But yeah. So Steve answered my steel question. He says, any steel produced after the detonation of nuclear weapons above ground is basically contaminated with isotopes. Wow. That's crazy. History Geek says, hey Alex, long time no see. Hope you have a nice Christmas and Christmas Eve. Thank you so much, and you too. King of Battleships says, how often did Cunard do a maintenance check on Queen Mary? That really depends on the specifics, because there were different kinds of maintenance checks. There were maintenance checks of light bulbs. You know, every day they checked for light bulbs that are out. Or if you're asking about paint, they checked after every single voyage. They checked the paint on the ship. You know, if you're asking about how many times they needed to check the hull for blemishes or damage or the need for new anti-fouling paint, they did that once or twice a year. So there's different levels of maintenance, and it's just like just like maintenance in a hotel. There's different levels of maintenance. There's things that you check every year, and then there's things you check every day or every hour. So it's the same thing for the Queen Mary. They had different levels of maintenance. Moonzer says, Alex, what do you think of the new game room on Queen Mary? It's okay. I don't really understand why they put it there. I don't think there's going to be a huge crowd of people looking for it, but it doesn't hurt anything. It's where it's located used to be the forward funnel shaft, so it's not like they've removed a historic area to put the game room in there. It wasn't historic, so there's nothing wrong with it at all. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just I don't believe it was necessary, But then again, it's not like they spent money on it. They're using just furniture that was already on the ship. They are using one of the televisions that was already in observation bar. All they did was remove it from observation bar and put it in that room. So it's not like they really spent any money. I think they bought maybe 2 of those giant, like they got like a foosball thing and they got like this other thing. So maybe that's the amount of money that they spent on it. It wasn't much. They didn't even repaint that room. It's still the same like wallpaper that it was before. So yeah, I don't even think they really spent much money on it. So it's not like any harm's been done, essentially. So I have no problem with it. I just don't think it was really that necessary, but yeah. Steven says, Merry Christmas to you all. Love the recent presentation on the last great cruise. Question, what happened to all the Cuban cigars and booze after she arrived? That's a question for Steve. Steve responded to Steven. Says, believe it or not, the liquor, caviar, and cigars were all auctioned off in 1968. Wow. Lachlan says, hey Alex, did you know the lifeboats on the Queen Mary were diesel and the generators were kerosene? The lifeboats were diesel so they didn't freeze in the Atlantic. Yes, I knew that, actually. I made videos about this stuff. But yeah, I do know that. In fact, the very surprise I've been telling everybody that I'm going to reveal in the next week or two, it has to do with knowledge of the Queen Mary. So it will be very difficult from now on, you guys, to be able to stump me on Queen Mary knowledge, because it is all being documented. It's all being documented. History Geeks says, hey Alex, next year I'm going on my first cruise in February. Awesome. I hope you enjoy it. So, Grant, we don't discuss politics on this channel. For one thing, there's enough politics in the world. Everybody has their opinions, everybody shares it elsewhere. There's no shortage of it. So on this channel, we mostly come together through our mutual interests in ocean liners, in the Queen Mary, and all kinds of stuff. So We don't need politics here. But Henry Hall fan says second class A deck overflow lounge was turned into a teenager's lounge. Oh, he's answering somebody else. Madison says, have you heard of the SS United States and what her conditions are at the moment? Yes, I am very much aware of the SS United States and her condition. History Geek says, where do you get your footage? Everywhere. Literally everywhere. If I can find it, that's where I get it. So there's no like one source. Maybe if there is, the biggest source would be YouTube. But everywhere. So if I find it, I take it. So yeah, I can't afford to be picky when it comes to the footage because, you know, there's always a need for it on this channel. Plumbit says, when are they going to remove those ghastly fluorescent lights in the hallways? Really throws off the vibe of the ship. They have. So most all the hallways on the Queen Mary now have completely had their fluorescent lights removed. There's maybe just a few little corners here and there that still have the fluorescent lights, but eventually they will be replaced. But otherwise, down the main corridors of the entire ship, all the fluorescent lights have been removed and replaced with warm white LEDs. Hello, Ken. How's it going? Ozzy says, congrats on hitting over 60,000 new subscribers. Well done. Thank you so much. That was definitely a really cool moment watching it surpass 60,000. I was like, oh, I'm about to hit 60K. Oh my gosh. Let's see. History Geek says, I got a letter from the jolly old fat man himself a few days ago. Oh, I don't remember sending a letter to you. Just kidding. Let's see. Plumbit says, Art Deco is best deco. It certainly is. It's my favorite design style. K4RNA says, can I have a cookie? Absolutely. Open up. Just kidding. Finally, I've caught up with comments. I'm all the way at the bottom now. Folks are talking about the SS United States. You know, the sad thing about the SS United States was that... Okay. So a lot of people complain that the Queen Mary was designated by the U.S. Coast Guard as a building. You know, because she is. She's designated as a building, not a ship anymore. She technically still is a ship. She's built as a ship. But on paper, she's not a ship. She's a building now. People complain, they're like, oh, that's terrible because, you know, because now whenever they do repairs, they do it to, you know, building code, but not to ship maritime standards. And the thing that people have to remember is when a ship remains a ship, like the SS United States did, it is subject to maritime safety standards. And the SS United States had to have all its interiors removed to get rid of all the asbestos. So all the interiors were gutted to get rid of all the asbestos. And when that happened, all hope for the SS United States was lost. I hate to be that grim about it, but I would be utterly flabbergasted if that ship suddenly had a very positive turnaround for it. And the reason why is because it might seem like, oh, well, the ship is gutted, so it's almost like a blank canvas in which, they could do whatever they want with it now. It might seem that way, but it's not so much like a blank canvas as a box that is empty. If you've got all these ideas for something, you're like, oh, I want to do this, this, and that, and this, and that, most people would go and build a box that contains all their ideas, right? And you can build that box any shape it needs to be to fit your ideas. But when you have a box that's already made, like the SS United States, and it's completely gutted, and it's a very specific shape, a very, very specific shape, all your ideas have to somehow squeeze into that very specific shaped box. And that can end up costing you more money than if you were to just build your own box. And so that's the problem with the SS United States, is that if she at least had a good portion of all those classic interiors, there at least would be a reason to turn it into a tourist attraction. There'd be something to show. There would be artifacts. There would be design to show people. But without it, there's virtually no value in it. And so it goes back to that metaphor of whoever wants to do something with the SS United States has to somehow fit all their ideas into this very specific box. And, that is the very reason why the ship, nothing's been done with it since then. There's been ideas, people have, pardon the metaphor, but floated ideas of, turning her into a cruise ship, turning her into a museum, turning her into a hotel. And those sound amazing. I hope it happens. But I would be surprised if it did. Only because, like I said, it's just more expensive to completely add interiors to the SS United States than it is to just build your own building. So, yeah, it would, yeah. It's sad. It's sad what happened to the SS United States. But that goes back to what I was saying about the Queen Mary, is be happy that the Queen Mary was designated as a building, because then they could keep it as a historic building. At least the interiors that the Queen Mary does still have left are still there. There's a reason for people to come, even if the latest exhibit on the ship fails. There's still at least the main hall, the main lounges, the engine room, all that stuff is still there for people who might not be there to see the latest and greatest exhibit on the Queen Mary. So, yeah. Plumbit says, is the Queen Mary 2 floating or on stilts or something? The Queen Mary 2 is still sailing the ocean. Yeah, she's still floating. She's still carrying passengers, doing regularly scheduled transatlantic crossings, and still doing cruises. Joe B., thank you so much. I'm glad you liked the vlog. Yeah. Okay, so drink some more tea. Yeah, if you guys haven't noticed that the footage in the corner is all Cunard ships, and yet there is footage of Olympic in there. And that's because for a brief period, Olympic belonged to the Cunard White Star Line. So that is why Olympic is in the mix-up with other Cunard ships. Steve says he has to go. See you later, Steve. Alright. Let's have some of this. What do they call it again? It's a Christmas mince pie. Lachlan says, are they going to be restoring any of the rugs, carpet, flooring on the Mary? I've noticed an old picture. There were rugs along the hall in front of the swimming pool, first class. So they're going to be... I have to use really loose terms here because they cannot recreate things to the very last detail. Because, as it turns out, it's really difficult to do that. The main hall, for instance, they completely ripped up the linoleum that was put there in 1994 or 97. Ripped up that linoleum because it was in really bad shape and installed all new linoleum floors that still resemble the floors from 1947. But when you look in the minute detail of the floors, it does not match perfectly with the 1947 floors because the linoleum that's available for the Queen Mary operators to purchase just isn't quite the same as what was available in 1947. So even though it looks from a distance a lot like the 1947 floors, when you get up really close to it, it's not the same. And so they have said that there are going to be more and more and more floors across the ship. And I don't say decks because I know people are like, oh, that's called a deck. For those people, when we're talking about the material that gets laid on the deck, it's probably best that we call it flooring because that makes it easier for people to understand. If I say decks, people might think I'm literally talking about the steel. So, but anyway, sorry, it's just there's been people who've really just gotten on my back about talking about floors versus decks, and I'm trying to tell them why. But anyway, so when it comes to the various flooring on the Queen Mary, the operators of the ship have mentioned that they are interested in removing a lot of the 1980s, 1990s carpeting and replacing it with historically accurate. They're being very careful not to say replica, but historically accurate floors. And the reason why is because they can't perfectly match it. But, for instance, in the first quarter of next year, they haven't said exactly when, but the first quarter of next year, the observation bar will be closed to undergo major refurbishments. And one of those things is to remove the ugly carpeting that's in the observation bar and replace it with linoleum floors that resemble the original 1936 linoleum floors. But like I said, they're not calling it a replica because it may not match perfectly with the 1936 floors. So, but they are interested in doing that. They're planning that all over the ship where there are still original floor patterns of linoleum. They plan to replace them with linoleum that at least looks the same. Some of the carpeting in the, what do you call it? in the corridors of the hotel area of the ship, the pattern that's there will eventually be removed, and what they're replacing it with is not original at all, but still looks nice. It's a red carpet, so it looks wonderful. Actually, I've seen it. It's going to be a red carpet, and it looks amazing. I've always said, if they have to have carpets on the Queen Mary, make it red carpet. It just looks classier, Everyone's like, oh, but I wish that they would just return the hallways back to linoleum. That'd be wonderful, but it's not going to happen. The Queen Mary is a hotel. The carpets in the hotel areas do dampen the sound of people walking, and it makes it more comfortable for people to sleep overnight. So I don't think they'll ever replace those hallway carpets with linoleum again. But we know that in the large public rooms, that is happening. So, eventually. But yeah. I'm just reading people's comments. Mark says, "Oh, you'll be enjoying. You're enjoying Christmas mince pie." Yeah, I certainly am. Some people are wondering what Olympic would have been like if it had been turned into a hotel. It's kind of a complex conversation, but if Olympic had been turned into a hotel, I don't think that today it would look much or at all like Olympic did. Because back then, there was no sentimentality for, the Georgian, Edwardian kind of period. There was no sentimentality for it. It was seen as like grandma's house. So, if the Olympic had been saved to be turned into a hotel, then most likely they would have removed almost all the interiors and then replaced them with Art Deco interiors or streamlined modern interiors, whichever one. And if that hadn't happened, then at least after the war, it would have been stripped down and then turned into mid-century interiors. People back then were not as much into preservation of historic buildings, or not historic buildings from the 1900s, because they weren't historic at that time. You know what I mean? It's kind of like looking at a building that was built in the year 2000, and you're just like, oh, that's not a historic building. Let's just do whatever we want with it. Let's completely remodel the interior and exterior. Right? I mean, people have been doing that. People still do that. I just saw photos the other day. How terrible is this? I saw photos the other day of someone who bought an old Victorian mansion and then completely renovated the interiors so it doesn't look Victorian at all. It looks like a modern, like super, super modern house with no colors. It's all gray and white. And it's all hard materials like stone. And there's no wood, just stone, glass, and steel. And I was just like, ugh. why would you do that? Why would you buy a Victorian mansion and do that to it? Like, anyway, sorry you guys, that's a rant, but it's the same thing for back then. They did not see, you know, the value in that old late Edwardian / early Georgian architecture. So they probably would have completely redone it by the 1950s. And even Queen Mary, you know, the only reason why the Queen Mary still retains a lot of her original, you know, wood paneling and stuff like that on the interiors was partly for preservation, but also mostly they didn't have the budget. They didn't have the budget to completely remove all those interiors. And they were still nice looking interiors. They were in good condition in the 70s, so they kept them. But believe you me, if they had the money in the 1970s to rip out all those interiors and build an entirely 1970s modern hotel, they probably would have out of it. Because even in the 1970s, there wasn't a sense of, oh, well, let's preserve this 1930s architecture. You know, 1930s were only 40 years before. It doesn't seem like that long ago. You know, even now, what was architecture like 40 years ago? So think of a building from the 1980s, something that was brand new, built in the 1980s. You wouldn't think of it as historic architecture. So it's the same problem in the 1970s. So we're actually very lucky that Queen Mary still has a lot of original interiors, or at least original-looking interiors. So yeah, that is my opinion about the Olympic, what would have happened to it. You know, it's just, it probably wouldn't have looked like the Olympic from the inside at all. I wouldn't even be surprised if they would have removed the funnels because it was an unnecessary maintenance issue. They probably would have removed the funnels and completely decked over the top of the ship. So, but yeah. And some people doubt, you know, they would doubt my opinion on the Olympic being completely renovated. But think about this. When the Olympic was still operating into the 1930s, they didn't have the money to completely renovate the ship and make it look more modern. So what did they do? They covered the grand staircase in seafoam green paint. So if that's not you know, if they had the money, they would have removed that staircase and completely built a new one in its place. So yeah, don't doubt it. They would have completely stripped down the whole Olympic. It would not have looked the same. Let's see. I'm reading people's reactions to when I was talking about the Victorian house that was completely modernized. It was terrible. It's just as terrible as it sounds. I looked at it. I was just like, I'm like, why would you do this to a historic building? You know, like, I get it. There are people who, like, I was talking to a guy who was in my comment section on some video. I was talking about a historic building. And he was like, oh, that's terrible. You know, no one's going to... If I buy a historic building, nobody's going to tell me I can't modernize it. You know, like, he had no care or respect for historic buildings whatsoever. He would rather... He literally told me this. He said he would rather see a historic building knocked down and replaced with a modern one than to have it stay and be restored. So... It's just sad. There are people, and you know, and it makes me sad because, you know, there are people all over the world who say, like, oh, silly Americans, you guys don't preserve history. And as much as a lot of us Americans want to be like, that's not true, we love history, we'll preserve old buildings and with that. But the truth is, most Americans wouldn't. Most Americans don't care about historic buildings and stuff like that. Like they think anything historic is just old. Like they don't think there's anything cool about it. Yet when they go to Europe, they go gaga because like, oh, look at all the architecture from, you know, from Leonardo da Vinci's time and stuff like that. You know, like they go gaga over it, and it's like, well, why don't you just preserve the buildings you have in the United States instead of knocking them all down? You know, and then maybe in a couple decades it'll be a very beloved building. Anyway, my little rant about that, but it's just absolutely terrible what some people do to historic buildings. It's just absolutely terrible. So, hey Leo, how's it going? King of Battleships says they should put the AC units inside the funnel to hide them and clean up Queen Mary's exterior profile. They did consider doing that, but one of the biggest problems was, where do you put the inlets and outlets to the ventilation? Because the funnel is just a giant cylinder of steel. The only way air can get in or out is the very top, but that's also where rain falls in. So, you know, they don't want debris or rain or hail or whatever to fall into the ventilation system for them to have to deal with that. So that's why a lot of ventilation equipment has vents that either point down or to the side. And so you can't just go carving holes into the side of the funnels for air to come in and out, or else the pictures that you take of the funnels will look terrible. So yeah, it might clean up the outside of the ship a little bit, but I think there's actually better ways of doing it besides hiding them in the funnels. I think there's actually a better way of doing it, which is hiding the air conditioning equipment into the old ventilation cowl vents, you know. So a lot of the cowl vents on the top of the Queen Mary, we're talking these huge ventilation pieces on the top, as well as many others. They're all still sitting there. They're all still capable of, you know, you can bring air in through them. It's not a big deal. So put them somewhere in the ship put the air conditioning equipment somewhere in the ship that is away from the top of the ship, but yet can still draw air from these old ventilation pieces. So, yeah, you know, I don't want to be specific, because I can name specific places where air conditioning equipment could be stored, but then I'd be sitting here all day, and you guys don't want to hear that. So, but yeah, there are places to put ventilation equipment that is better than the funnels, and it would help clean up the top of the ship a little bit. So, yeah. King of Battleships says, Cunard should have kept the Queen Mary and turned the ship into a museum themselves. That's not what Cunard does. I mean, do you go to a carpet cleaning company and say, show me all your antique carpet cleaning equipment? No, they don't keep them. They throw away whatever's used and is replaceable by the newest stuff. You know, do you go to, you know, I'm trying to think of another example, but, you know, a car dealership and go, oh, show me the classic cars that you used to sell in the 1950s. You know, like, they don't have it. Yeah. So, you know, Cunard is not a museum company. They are a ship company. They do cruises, they do transatlantic travel. They don't handle that stuff. Now, granted, they do have, supposedly, an archives building where some things from the past are still kept. Mainly, like, paper stuff and maybe some dishes and glassware and stuff like that. A couple of artifacts here and there. But they would not keep a whole ship to do that. That's not what they do. And so other people were, like, telling me, oh, why doesn't Cunard just buy the Queen Mary and turn her into, like, a classic cruise experience? Is there even one? I mean, Queen Mary was retired before, really a lot of old ships were turned into cruise ships. So, but anyway, the point is that, once again, Cunard is all about the modern age. They're all about what can we offer people in terms of modern experiences. They don't look to the past. So, yeah. Geez, there are some, like... As soon as I looked, the alarms stopped. There was, like, smoke alarms going off for, like, solid 5 minutes. Anyway, what time is it? 2:33? Okay. So, yeah, Cunard, they only do modern stuff. They don't do old stuff. So they would have never been interested in that. They're still not interested in taking back the Queen Mary for any reason whatsoever. They're not interested. So... History Geek says Disney is restoring Queen Mary, yes, but they're making bad decisions too. I mean, the arcade was not. So, History Geeks, Disney is not part of it. I just want to make sure you know that Disney is not part of this at all. Disney abandoned the Queen Mary in 1992. That was 31 years ago. They have not been back since. So this isn't Disney. This is a company that is hired by the city of Long Beach to run the ship. They are called Evolution Hospitality. But they're not making the decisions that everybody wants necessarily, but they're not making bad decisions right now. I mean, I've seen what they're doing, and there's a few things I wouldn't do, but they're not making any bad decisions right now. They're doing actually some pretty cool stuff. And that arcade thing, that's not a bad decision. I think you're talking about the game room. The game room, like I said, it's not taking up a historic space, because the area that it's in was not historic. There was nothing there in the days of the Queen Mary was sailing. It was just the funnel shaft. And they didn't really spend hardly any money on opening that game room. So it's not like they're wasting money on it. Like I said, they bought, like, a foosball table. I think that's it. Like, the television is from the observation bar. The furniture is from Sir Winston's. So everything in that room, they didn't even repaint the room. It's all the same stuff that was there before. So all they did was buy a foosball table. So it's not like they really, like, wasted any money or time on it, So I'm not really bothered by anything that Evolution is doing. I mean, right now, the general manager, Steve Koloka, he's been making a lot of really good business decisions for the ship. I mean, there's a reason why the Queen Mary has turned a $2.25 million profit in just 3 months. There's a reason. And it's because he's doing the right things. He knows what he's doing, and he's been the one that's been spearheading all of the restoration projects on the ship. I mean, Steve had interviewed Steve Koloka, and had also interviewed the Historic Resources Advisor for the ship, and they're talking about bringing back the lifeboats. They're talking about restoring the davits and stuff like that, so that way, because the davits are in bad shape. Restoring the davits and bringing back the lifeboats. They want the ship to look as much original as possible, while still maintaining, some aspects of it for the modern age. Because people, they don't want to walk into a place that's covered in plastic for preservation. They want to walk into a place that they can interact with and enjoy. So some things have to remain new, but yeah. Let's see. Lachlan says, I also saw that the engine room looks a lot cleaner and better lit on the Mary. Oh, yes. That is one of the major pluses. I mean, mainly the work that was done in that room was just adding lights, but you'll be surprised what adding some lights will do to a space. I mean, you walk into the engine room now, it looks so interesting now, because before it was just lit with a couple of lights and it was all white light bulbs. So you walk in there and it's just a big room full of white machinery and it's dusty and, you know, and nothing moves. But they added these show lights in there that the lights themselves offer a little bit of movement, a little bit of flash, a little bit of color. So it makes the room look more interesting. And yeah, there's some what I call purists. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but there's some, like, you know, refurbishment purists who are like, oh no, that room doesn't need all those colorful lights. And it's like, I understand that point of view, but, you know, this isn't, you know, the 1970s when people were fine just walking through a big room that had no movement, no color, no nothing. You know, it was just a static, what do you call it? A static display. People today don't want that. People today, if you want to compete, if you want more people to be interested in the ship, more people to be interested in these spaces, you got to do at least the bare minimum and, you know, spruce up the place with some better lights. You know, so we're not talking about making the whole place into a disco ship. It's just a few things, you know, a flickering light here or something like that to represent electricity flowing. Just something like that, just to keep people's attention, make it look cool. People walk in there, and even though nothing moves and nothing is operating, it feels like it is. And that's what people want. They want a tourist attraction that feels like it's still alive, even though nothing is moving, you know? And it's the same thing for the whole experience in general. People want the experience of being on one of these old ocean liners crossing the Atlantic. But you can't do that on the Queen Mary. It doesn't leave Long Beach. So the least you could do is try to give the illusion that the ship is still operating. I think people want that. And that's what I told the manager, Steve Koloka. I said people want to feel like they are on a transatlantic crossing aboard the Queen Mary. So if you can offer them things that fill up their whole day with things to do that feel like it's on a voyage, people will love it. People will, you know, pay tons of money for that. I think he agreed. He didn't say he agreed, but he did say that my ideas were all really good ideas, and he was taking notes on all of them, and he was going to present those notes to his team. So, you know, yeah. But yeah. And this little stool that I'm sitting on is so uncomfortable after, well, then again, it has been like an hour and 40 minutes sitting on this thing. But, Hey, Ron, how's it going? It's going good. Moonzer asks, how many stewards were on the Queen Mary? I don't know. Not off the top of my head, at least. I'm sure I got it somewhere in a book or something. Alright, so I think, well, no, there's more people watching right now than there were half an hour ago. I thought the numbers were dwindling, so I thought, oh, maybe it's time for me to just end the live stream, but there's a lot of people watching. King of Battleships says, how often did Cunard do maintenance checks on Queen Mary? Somebody asked that earlier. They asked that exact question earlier, so it basically... well, no, I think it was you, because I answered that question. like I said, it depended on what it was. It's not like they did everything all at once. They didn't just do a maintenance check and then refurbish the whole ship all at once. They did refurbishments or maintenance checks for individual things at various points in time. Some things were checked every day, some things were checked every week, some things were checked every month, and some things were checked every year. So it really depends on what it is. But Steve says you need to finish your food. I don't think I can. My tea is already stone cold, and this mince pie, I can only have so much of it. It's got a very strong flavor. I don't know what flavor that is, but it's got a very, very strong flavor to it. So I can only have so much of it. But yeah. Well, I technically don't have to stop the live stream until 3. I told everybody that I'd be live streaming until 3, but, you know, if it does kind of dip down and not many people are talking or they're asking the same questions, that's when I usually, like, stop the live stream. Because I'm like, at this point, we're just kind of sputtering out, you know? But it's still going, so... It's still going. Loser says, Alex, do you have any cute ebooks? No, unfortunately I don't. All my focus has been on Queen Mary lately. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not looking to buy any books anytime soon. Because I've spent so much money in books this year. Like, it's ridiculous. I spent a lot of money in books. And I still haven't even read all of them. So I'm like, okay, I need to slow down and, like, try to read through them. So, but yeah. Ron says, heard the third funnel is going to get some TLC. Yes, that was going to be part of my repair update, was that Queen Mary's third funnel is going to be repainted in January. So everybody's looking forward to that because the paint's been chipping and peeling for years now. Mike says, throw in an ice cube and have some iced tea. This tea tastes terrible when it's cold. All of these British teas, when they're stone cold, they taste terrible. They're very, very bitter. So yeah, can't do it. K4RNA says, do we know if the new railings have been water treated? I don't think they have, to be honest. They should be. You know, back when I was talking about them installing the new teak railings and stuff like that, that they should be waterproofed and stained. And a lot of people were like, well, Alex, you don't stain teak and you don't waterproof teak. Teak is already waterproof. And yeah, for decks, it's like that. But on the Queen Mary, the railings were always stained and then covered in like a varnish. And yet they were also teak railings. They did that for Queen Mary's railings. And they still do that on the Queen Mary 2. The Queen Mary 2 has teak railings. They also stain and varnish those as well. But the new railings that they've installed on certain areas of the Queen Mary, they have not stained or varnished them. And now they're starting to get gray, which teak gets gray in the weather. That's perfectly normal. Yeah, so they've started to get gray. And it just doesn't look right. The ship was not meant to have gray handrails. You know, it just wasn't designed to look like that. So it's going to bother the heck out of me. trying to think if there's anything else I'm going to say, but yeah, there will be one more tea time next week to finish off the year. There will be a Queen Mary repair update coming out next week that will also include the year in review. So the whole year's worth of maintenance stuff that's been done on the Queen Mary. And then sometime in the next week or two will be a video announcing the big surprise that I've been working on for the last month for everybody. So I'm excited about that because that thing it's consumed almost all my free time because I've been so excited about it. But yeah, I hope you guys like it. Part of me is like, oh, people won't care about it because they don't care about reading about such, you know, nerdy stuff. But I don't know. The other part of me is kind of like, your whole audience is built on nerds. Of course they're going to read it. So I'm like, I don't. Part of me is like torn. I'm like, will people actually care about what I'm doing, or will they not? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I see people are leaving. So anyway, folks, I am gonna end the live stream here. It's been, basically an hour and 50 minutes, and I do have to get going anyway. But thank you so much, Mark. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you next week, and yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and happy holidays, and Merry Christmas to you all. Thanks. Bye.